Welcome to her Fireside Stories, where every story warms your heart, sparks your courage, and keeps you captivated from start to finish. Today, I'm bringing you a tale so shocking, so emotionally charged, that it'll leave you breathless. Imagine standing at your own husband's funeral, only for your son to walk in with a mysterious woman he calls your husband's true love, claiming your entire life was built on lies. But trust me, what our heroine Lydia discovers hidden in a safe deposit box at the very end will completely turn the tables, silencing everyone, including her ruthless son and his smug companion. To fully experience this gripping journey of betrayal, redemption, and powerful resilience, make sure you stay with me to the very end. Don't forget to subscribe to her Fireside Stories for more powerful narratives like this one. Drop a comment letting me know your thoughts. Would you forgive a betrayal this deep? And tell me where you're tuning in from, because I love connecting with my listeners around the world. Now, gather close and let's dive into Lydia's unforgettable story. I never thought terror could mingle so closely with grief until the moment my only son, Ethan, marched into my husband's funeral with a statuesque woman on his arm, a woman I'd never seen in person but had grown to resent from a distance. My husband, Adam, lay in a closed casket at the front of the crowded chapel, surrounded by bouquets of white lilies and solemnly dressed mourners. Yet all eyes swung away from the casket as Ethan cleared his throat and announced, in a voice that seemed to ring off the wooden pews, "This is Natalia, the real love of Dad's life." In that instant, an entire lifetime's worth of sorrow pressed against my rib cage. My breath seized up, and I could only stare. People in the congregation turned, startled and confused, unsure whether they should gawk at me or at the duo now standing in the center aisle. The hush in the room was so thick it felt like a physical presence. I felt my heart quiver, partly out of shock and partly out of profound betrayal. Ethan stepped closer, his expression set in stubborn determination. "She's the woman he wanted by his side all along," he continued, voice echoing in the hush. My name, Lydia, seemed to vanish into the background. This brazen, younger stranger with immaculate blonde hair and a sleek black dress was apparently meant to supersede 32 years of marriage. Or, at least, that's how Ethan framed it. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I was too stunned to form words. My husband had passed away mere days earlier, and here was our only child, humiliating me during a ceremony meant to honor the life Adam and I had built. A sudden hush of embarrassment swept over the crowd. Someone let out a nervous cough. Another person began whispering to a neighbor, but the hush returned as I gathered my composure. If you're here with me so far, I'd love to know your initial reaction. Comment 1 if you think Ethan was totally out of line, or 2 if you suspect there's more to the story than meets the eye. Let me know your thoughts. In that suffocating silence, Natalia glided forward, leveled her gaze at me, and reached out with a cream-colored envelope. Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a superior smile, as though none of the funeral guests existed. Only me, her, and Adam's memory hovering like a specter. She said, "He left instructions," as if brandishing a victory. My mind reeled. I couldn't understand how Adam's final wishes could revolve around this interloper. But my son, Ethan, stood next to her, nodding soberly. Over the years, Ethan and I had grown distant. Something had poisoned our relationship. Now it seemed that poison had a face, name, and perfect posture. I was too numb to open the envelope there in front of so many prying eyes. Instead, I slipped it into my purse and forced myself to finish the funeral proceedings with measured dignity. Friends, neighbors, and Adam's colleagues from the financial firm lined up to offer condolences. Some frowned at Natalia, others whispered behind their hands. Meanwhile, Ethan sat beside her in the front pew, ignoring me entirely. It wasn't just heartbreak I felt, it was raw bewilderment. Adam and I had weathered decades together. How had I missed the existence of another woman, a hidden life, and a betrayal so deep that it seemed to swallow up the memory of our entire marriage? When it was over, everyone scattered to their cars under the hot midday sun. Natalia and Ethan had apparently slipped out early. As I trudged across the parking lot alone, I couldn't help but remember a time when Ethan was a young boy, gripping my hand on his first day of school, so trusting, so certain I was on his side. Now he was an adult, looking at me with disdain, as if I were the one who had turned our family into a spectacle. Before I continue, I'd love to hear where you're reading from. Type out your city or country if you feel comfortable sharing. It helps me feel like we're building a community around this story. I drove home, well, to what I thought was still my home, scarcely remembering the route, my vision blurred with tears that refused to fall. The place looked unchanged from the outside, the same green lawn, the rose bushes Adam and I had planted. I closed my eyes for a moment, recalling my husband's laughter years ago when we'd carried those first potted roses to the backyard. We were happy then, weren't we? Or had that been a convenient illusion all along? Once inside, I found the courage to open the envelope. A jolt of panic shot through me as I scanned the legal documents it contained. In stiff black lettering was a declaration. The house was no longer in my name. Everything, our bank accounts, Adam's share in the investment firm, was bequeathed to Ethan. I nearly dropped the papers. I sank onto the sofa, my mind spinning at the audacity. Adam had evidently disinherited me. My own son was carrying out the will, supporting the woman who had trespassed on our marriage. Numbly, I wandered into Adam's study. The faint scent of his cologne still lingered among the shelves of finance books and old trophies from charity golf tournaments. He had told me in his final weeks that he wanted privacy to organize important documents before his passing. I'd respected it, never intruding. Now the horrible truth dawned on me. He'd used that time to finalize treachery. I noticed the bottom drawer of his massive oak desk was ajar, a small ring of keys left behind. With trembling hands, I tried one key after another until the drawer slid open, revealing a slim, leather-bound journal. Inside the front cover, the date was a mere 5 weeks old, Adam's shaky handwriting betraying his deteriorating health. There I read words that shattered my heart in an entirely new way. I don't have much time left. I have to confess what I've done. Feeling the weight of those words, please let me know if you would have dared open that journal, or if you would have left it shut in your grief. Comment 1 to read on, or 2 if you would have paused. The confession unraveled as a horrifying tapestry of betrayal. Adam wrote of a 15-year affair with Natalia, beginning when she was an intern at his firm. He described in chilling detail how he diverted funds from our joint account to support her lavish lifestyle. He wrote about forging evidence of my so-called infidelity and invented tales that painted me as irresponsible with money. What struck me most were the lines describing how he had pulled Ethan into his orbit of lies, bombarding him with falsified statements that framed me as the villain. My son's loyalty had been seized, and my own husband had orchestrated the entire rift. I couldn't move. My eyes raced across the scrawled pages, paragraphs describing secret apartments, hush money, and transactions so complicated that my untrained mind could barely keep up. Then came a piece of information that swerved the narrative once more. Adam's finances were in shambles. High-risk investments had flopped, leaving him teetering on the edge of legal disaster. He had been cooking the books at his firm, risking legal action that could destroy everything. At the bottom of one page, his penmanship turned particularly shaky. Natalia thinks she'll inherit all the wealth. She has no idea most of it is gone. She doesn't know about the fraud investigations. This is my final confession. My lawyer will send it to the authorities the day after my funeral. A surge of conflicting emotions swelled in my chest. The betrayal, the heartbreak, and a minuscule flicker of relief. If Adam's confession went to the authorities, maybe I'd be safe from his scheme. Maybe the truth about my innocence would come out. But in that moment, reeling from the knowledge that everything I believed in was a lie, I felt too raw to hope. Would you feel angry, crushed, or strangely vindicated in my position? It's a complex swirl, right? Let me know if you'd be furious, comment 1, or in shock, comment 2. A thunderous knock erupted at the front door, snapping me from my daze. Through the study window, I watched Ethan and Natalia step onto the porch, a black sedan with tinted windows idling behind them. Their suitcases told me all I needed to know. They weren't just dropping by, they were moving in. Or rather, they were moving me out. Concealing Adam's journal under my arm, I opened the door. Ethan's eyes were as cold as a distant star. "You have until tomorrow night to leave," he declared, brandishing another set of legal documents. "The house is legally mine now, and Natalia's name is on the corporate paperwork as Dad's partner." Natalia's smug smile was a blade twisting in my chest. She looked around, not with sorrow, but with the satisfaction of someone claiming her prize. I tried to speak calmly. "Ethan, I'm asking you as your mother, will you hear me out?" But he shook his head with mechanical finality. "I already heard enough from Dad. You cheated on him. You drained our accounts. I saw the evidence." His voice was so filled with loathing, it felt like an actual punch. I locked eyes with Natalia. Her expression was a veneer of triumph, and I suddenly realized how adept she must have been at deception. The calculating glimmer in her gaze told me she had no remorse. She was, in her own way, as trapped in Adam's web of secrets as I was, but she played the role of accomplice far too comfortably. They marched past me into the foyer, heads held high. "I haven't even packed," I rasped, though part of me was outraged that I had to justify any move in my own home. "We're giving you 24 hours, Natalia said, as though she were doing me a kindness. "If this scene makes your blood boil, take a second to let me know. Comment 1, if you're outraged on my behalf, or 2, if you'd have handled the confrontation differently. I'm genuinely curious how you'd react in the heat of that moment." I retreated to the bedroom I'd shared with Adam for decades, sinking onto the bed with the journal pressed protectively against my chest. Bit by bit, the events of the day weighed heavier, and a flurry of questions battered my mind. How was I going to survive financially if Adam had gutted our accounts? Where would I find shelter if I lost this house? And most urgently, how was I supposed to confront Ethan's hatred when his heart was already turned against me? Desperation prodded me to call my old friend Serena. She'd reached out after reading Adam's obituary, offering any help I might need. It had been years since we'd really talked. Adam's controlling nature had made me drift away from friends. But the warmth in Serena's voice was instantaneous. "Oh, Lydia," she said, worry lacing her tone. "I knew something was off at the funeral. Are you all right?" That simple question unleashed the tears I'd been battling all day. I mumbled the basics: Adam's betrayal, the house takeover, Ethan's estrangement. "You come here," Serena insisted. "I have a guest room you can use for as long as you want." That night, I huddled in a modest motel off the highway, having spent my last bit of readily available cash. I couldn't face another confrontation with Ethan and Natalia, not while my nerves were shredded. Surrounded by peeling wallpaper and the stale odor of cheap disinfectant, I flipped through the journal's pages once more, reading Adam's final confessions in detail. He had masterminded everything: my alienation from our son, the complex embezzlement at his investment firm, and the facade that allowed him to funnel funds to Natalia without arousing suspicion. Even as fury coiled in my gut, a twisted sense of pity emerged. Adam had dug himself into a hole, burying the best parts of himself under layers of lies. The very last entry, though, suggested something akin to genuine remorse. He'd planned on revealing enough to exonerate me and condemn himself, and presumably Natalia. That half measure was either a final cruelty or a desperate attempt to do something right. Comment 1 if you think Adam was beyond redemption, or 2 if you suspect some shred of regret existed in his final hours. I walked to the door, my heart racing, but my resolve firm. Let them think they had won. The real battle was just beginning. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Ethan's eyes were cold, distant, so different from the warm gaze of the boy I had raised. Natalia stood slightly behind him, her smile barely concealing her impatience. "We don't need to make this difficult," Ethan said, pushing past me into the foyer. "The papers are clear. Dad changed his will 3 years ago." I clutched my purse containing Adam's journal. "I haven't even read what's in the envelope yet." "It doesn't matter if you've read it," Natalia said, stepping inside and looking around the house with undisguised greed. "The house belongs to Ethan now. You have 24 hours to pack your essentials and leave." The coldness of it all, the calculated cruelty, made my knees weak. This was my home, the kitchen where I'd taught Ethan to bake cookies, the living room where we'd opened Christmas presents, the garden I had tended for decades. "I'd like to speak to my son alone," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Natalia laughed. "Anything you have to say to him, you can say in front of me." Ethan didn't contradict her. Instead, he glanced at his watch. "We don't have time for this. We've already been generous letting you stay until after the funeral. The movers are coming tomorrow." "Movers? For my things? For whatever you don't take with you," he said dismissively. "Dad left everything to me, the house, the accounts, his share of the firm. You get your personal items and a small allowance. It's all legal." I finally opened the envelope, scanning the contents quickly. It was exactly as Ethan had said. Adam had disinherited me almost completely. By the next morning, I steeled myself and returned to the house briefly to gather the last of my personal belongings. Serena had promised to meet me later that afternoon, but an icy shock rippled through me the moment I pulled into the driveway. Parked in front of the house was a dark sedan. A man in a crisp suit was speaking animatedly with Ethan on the porch. The moment he spotted me, he lifted a badge from his breast pocket. "I'm Detective Monroe," he said. "I need to question you about your late husband's financial dealings." My pulse leaped. On one hand, I expected the authorities. Adam's journal suggested he'd triggered a confession. But on the other hand, I feared they might think I was complicit. Ethan hovered behind him, eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. Uncertainty, or maybe guilt. "Yes, Detective," I answered. I, I'm more than willing to help." Inside, Natalia was nowhere to be seen, but the tension hung thick. Detective Monroe began listing the charges the firm was investigating: embezzlement, forgery, fraud of shocking magnitude. "Several offshore accounts were opened in your name, Mrs. Darling," Monroe said, using the new last name we've given me in the rewritten version. "And there are suspicious signatures we need to verify." My cheeks burned with indignation. "I never opened those accounts, and the signature must be forged. I had no idea Adam was doing this." Ethan's stony expression cracked just a bit. "They've questioned me too," he muttered, barely meeting my gaze. "Natalia is being taken in for questioning. Apparently, the firm uncovered discrepancies that point to Dad's massive cover-up." The detective assured me this was just preliminary and asked that I not leave town. Just as quickly as he'd appeared, Monroe was gone, a promise of more thorough interrogation soon. The house felt hauntingly quiet. Ethan stood there, uncertain. I searched his face for signs of empathy, an opening. Instead, he muttered an abrupt goodbye and slipped away. "If you're still here, do you think it's time Ethan realized how deeply he'd been lied to?" Give me a 1 if you believe he's on the cusp of opening his eyes, or a 2 if you think his denial runs too deep. I retreated to Serena's place that same afternoon, driving in a state of half shock. If you've ever tried to keep your composure while your life is crumbling, you might understand that strange numbness that takes over, like you're stepping outside your own body, watching a movie about someone else. Serena's home was a cozy cottage with cheerful yellow paint, a tidy garden out front, and a hammock under an ancient oak. She ushered me inside, offering tea and a warm embrace that I needed more than I'd ever admit. "You're safe here," she whispered. For the first time in days, I felt a small measure of security. We talked late into the night, me filling her in on the layers of deceit Adam had left behind. The house, the firm, the phony accounts, the possibility that I might face criminal charges. Serena's eyes brimmed with tears and anger on my behalf. She reminded me of the strong, opinionated friend from our college years, the one Adam had gradually isolated me from, though I never realized it was his doing until now. She cleared her throat. "I have an old colleague, Juliet, who's a forensic accountant. She might help you figure out what Adam was really up to and how to defend yourself." Juliet's name flickered a new spark of hope in me. We agreed that calling Juliet in the morning was our best plan. Before drifting to sleep in the softness of Serena's guest room, I clutched Adam's journal to my chest. Part of me loathed every entry, every line of self-serving half-remorse scrawled in that worn notebook. Another part of me needed it, needed proof that my life wasn't just some pathetic delusion. It could be key evidence to save me from the mess Adam had left behind. Before we move on, quick checkpoint. Are you the kind who confronts a crisis head-on, or do you seek out help from trusted friends first? Type 1 for confrontation, 2 for leaning on allies. Early the next day, Juliet arrived like a force of nature. Tall, refined, and exuding competence, she stepped into Serena's living room armed with folders, a laptop, and an air of resolute determination. "I've heard enough from Serena to know there's quite a puzzle here," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'd like to help if you'll let me." It felt surreal, sharing the labyrinth of Adam's finances with a stranger, but Juliet's probing questions made sense. When did Adam first open joint accounts? When did you notice changes in his spending habits? She took notes meticulously, frowning at certain points in Adam's journal. One detail that caught her attention: the timeline of Adam's alleged forgeries. According to the journal, his embezzlement started small and spiraled out of control over the last 5 years, exactly when Ethan began distancing himself from me. "It fits the pattern," Juliet murmured. "As Adam dove deeper into financial fraud, he'd have a stronger motive to keep you in the dark." By afternoon, Juliet had compiled a preliminary assessment. Her bright laptop screen showed overlapping transactions, suspicious wire transfers, and shell companies with meaningless names. "Your husband went to great lengths to conceal his trail," she explained, "but near the end, he was sloppy, probably because he was dying and rushed to finalize certain documents." My phone buzzed, making my heart skip a beat. It was Ethan. He sounded subdued, his voice losing that icy tone for a moment. "Natalia's been arrested," he said, "and the board at Dad's firm froze all assets. Mom, I don't know what to believe anymore." Despite everything, I felt a flicker of motherly relief. Maybe he was finally seeing through the lies Adam had spun. I invited him to meet me at the police station the next day, explaining that Detective Monroe wanted to interview me again. Ethan hesitated, but agreed. Hanging up, my breath whooshed out as though I'd been holding it all day. Let's pause for a quick poll, everyone. Would you trust Ethan at this point? Comment 1 if you'd trust him. 2 if you'd keep him at arm's length. The following morning, I walked into the police station, flanked by Juliet and a lawyer she had recommended, a reserved yet sharp-minded man named Simon. My stomach churned as Detective Monroe led us into a cramped interrogation room. My seat felt too hard, the overhead light too bright. "Mrs. Darling," he began, shuffling papers, "we've discovered more regarding Adam's activities. Several documents appear to bear your signature, but a handwriting analysis suggests they might be forged." Relief flitted through me. That lined up with what Adam wrote in his journal, and it confirmed I wasn't complicit. Yet the detective's gaze was cautious. "We're not ruling out the possibility you were aware of the scheme. If you cooperate fully, we can clarify your involvement." Simon cleared his throat, a subtle power move. "My client is prepared to share everything she knows. In fact, she has a vital piece of evidence." Juliet handed over scanned copies of Adam's journal entries, along with her notes on the forgeries and shell companies. As the detective perused them, the tension in the room eased fractionally. Just then, the door cracked open, and Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking gaunt and wide-eyed. The detective permitted him to join us, though the conversation paused. Ethan's gaze flicked to me, then to Simon, then to Juliet. "Mom," he said, voice thick with emotion, "I'm sorry." And before I could respond, Detective Monroe tapped a folder on the table. "New evidence has come to light from a safe deposit box. Apparently, your husband recorded several videos confessing to the entire fraud. The files also implicate Natalia quite strongly, and they include statements clearing you of wrongdoing." He turned to Ethan. "You brought them in?" Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "I found the key in my father's desk. I—" His voice cracked as he faced me. "He admitted to framing you, Mom. Everything, the fake bank statements, the rumor of your affair, he staged it so I'd resent you enough to never question him. If you've ever felt vindicated and heartbroken at the same time, you'll understand my speechless tears. Hit 1, if you've been there. 2, if you can only imagine that whirlwind." Once the detective concluded his questioning, we stepped out into the hallway. Natural light flooded through high windows, and for a moment, I felt like I could finally breathe. Ethan waited until we were a few steps away from the door before turning to me, eyes shimmering with regret. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered. "But if there's anything I can do, anything to make things right." A tear slid down my cheek. My maternal instincts roared to life. Ethan might be an adult, but I still saw the boy he'd been, trusting me to bandage scraped knees. "I can't pretend those 5 years didn't happen," I said, "but we can start again. I only ask that you keep your heart and mind open to the truth." He nodded, looking both relieved and devastated. "Dad, he manipulated us both." At that moment, the mention of his father's name was like a ghost passing by. Adam was gone, leaving behind havoc. Yet for the first time, Ethan acknowledged that the father he idolized was capable of unimaginable deceit. Natalia, according to the detective, had been arrested as she tried to withdraw funds from an offshore account. In her last phone call, she ranted that Adam had tricked her too, claiming all sorts of innocence. Meanwhile, Ethan told me that the law firm's board of directors had severed ties with both Adam's estate and Natalia, casting them into the center of a criminal investigation. We parted ways with Ethan on the station steps. I felt no immediate sense of triumph. Everything was overshadowed by the knowledge that my husband's illusions had nearly destroyed us. But as Simon and Juliet talked legal strategy, a seed of hope grew. Maybe I could reclaim my life and my relationship with Ethan, despite the rubble. I'm curious, are you someone who can forgive easily if the other person shows genuine remorse? Comment 1 if yes, 2 if no. I'd love to know how you approach these crossroads. That night, I returned to Serena's house, where Juliet had spread out a meticulous chart on the dining table. She'd uncovered a hidden account Adam had created in my name, a redemption fund, as she dubbed it. According to the documents, the funds were actually legitimate, not tied to embezzlement. In Adam's final months, he'd quietly stashed a substantial sum of money, a last-ditch safety net for me. At first, I gaped at Juliet. Is this really mine? Juliet nodded, tapping an official record that confirmed the account's origin. Adam might have wanted to control you in life, but it appears he wanted to leave you with a lifeline in death. A swirl of conflicting emotions overcame me. Gratitude, confusion, fury. Did this absolve him? Hardly. But it meant I wasn't left penniless. Ethan called shortly after, voice quavering. Mom, there's more. The deed to the house wasn't legally transferred. Dad forgot to finalize it. The place is still yours. He let out a half laugh, half sob. That means Natalia and I never had any right to kick you out. Even over the phone, I felt the weight of his shame. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind him that he'd inflicted deep wounds. But another part, perhaps the greater part, simply let relief pour in. Thank you for telling me, I said, amazed by how calm my voice sounded. We'll figure out the details soon. After the call, I sat with Serena and Juliet, the chaotic swirl of recent events replaying in my mind. My entire world had flipped, but it wasn't all tragedy. There were glimmers of justice. Natalia had been arrested, the house was still mine, and the redemption fund could keep me afloat. Most importantly, the wedge between Ethan and me was beginning to crack. If you're watching along, let me know how you'd handle hearing that you weren't actually dispossessed of your home. Would you rejoice, comment 1, or feel anxious about the next step, comment 2? I stood before the house the next morning, my house, keys in hand. The police had done a thorough search the day before, and the place remained empty now. Natalia's furniture additions and the hints of her presence still clung to the decor. I saw a stray pair of her expensive high-heeled shoes forgotten near the foyer. A wave of disgust churned in my stomach, but rather than toss them into the trash, I dropped them into a box labeled Natalia. I wanted to leave no trace of her behind, but I refused to stoop to petty destruction. I wandered into Adam's study with slow steps. Once the epicenter of so much deceit, it now felt strangely hollow. The shelves were half ransacked by investigators. Various documents had been seized as evidence. My gaze fell upon the desk where Adam wrote his final entries. There were marks where he must have wrapped his pen in thought, little dents in the wood that I'd never noticed before. That's when my phone rang, the caller ID revealing an unknown number. I hesitated and answered. A hushed voice spoke. Lydia, you don't know me, but I was an accountant at Adam's firm. My name is Andrea, and I want you to know you weren't at fault. She then explained that she had discovered irregularities in the books months ago, confronted Adam, and been threatened with legal action if she went public. The call was quick, but her words resonated. People knew Adam was at fault. People believed in my innocence. Relief filtered through me like a slow sunrise. The illusions Adam had spun were unraveling day by day, and though it was painful, it also opened the door to a future of honesty, something lacking in my marriage. Now, let me know, is there someone you'd like to hear from if you were in my situation? Like an unexpected ally confirming your innocence? Comment 1 if that would feel validating, or 2 if you'd rather handle it on your own. The days became a blur of legal paperwork and emotional recalibration. Simon worked tirelessly to ensure the police recognized I was another victim of Adam's elaborate fraud rather than a co-conspirator. Juliet continued digging through financial records, providing me updates that both astounded and horrified me. For instance, Adam had used seemingly innocuous charity donations to mask siphoned funds, forging board members' signatures and burying transactions under layers of shell accounts. Meanwhile, Ethan grew more apologetic with each conversation. We began meeting in the house's sunroom, the one area Natalia hadn't bothered to redecorate. Those discussions were raw. Ethan admitted to ignoring my letters, phone calls, and messages for years, blindly trusting the evidence Adam fed him. I was so angry at you, he confessed. that I wanted to cut you out of my life entirely. And it cut deep, hearing my own son articulate his hatred so plainly, but it also liberated some part of me that had wondered for so long what I'd done to deserve his silence. As the truth came to light, I began to see how thoroughly Adam had orchestrated every rift. Not only had he used me as a scapegoat for financial woes, but he'd also fueled Ethan's resentment, ensuring father and son remained united under a false narrative. Late one evening, we discovered a series of voice recordings on Adam's old phone. They had been automatically backed up to the cloud. Hearing Adam's voice so soon after his funeral made my scalp prickle. In these recordings, he spoke openly to Natalia about safeguarding illusions, about blaming me for expenses that never existed. Some might ask why I kept listening, but every word felt like a piece of the jigsaw puzzle, clarifying how we'd reached this horrendous juncture. Thanks for sticking with me. If you're still engrossed, drop a quick reaction. 1. If you believe in hearing the hard truth, or 2, if you prefer to keep certain details buried. I appreciate the company on this journey. One morning, I stepped outside to retrieve the mail, half expecting to find more ominous legal notices. Instead, I discovered a small bouquet of daisies on my doorstep, no note attached. My heart wrenched at the possibility of who might have left them. Natalia was behind bars, so it certainly wasn't her. Could Ethan have left them as a gesture of peace? Or had Serena or Juliet placed them there to brighten my day? I pushed the mystery aside to focus on the pressing matter at hand, ensuring that charges against me were dropped and that the rightful blame for the firm's financial ruin was pinned on the correct parties, namely Adam, posthumously, and Natalia. Juliet's voice rang in my memory explaining that the firm's clients would have recourse through insurance. I prayed none of the unsuspecting retirees or families who invested through Adam were left penniless. The moral weight of it pressed on me. Adam's actions had harmed more than just our family. That afternoon, Ethan came by with a final piece of Adam's puzzle, a battered, old-fashioned key he'd found in Adam's sock drawer. "I think it's for a safe deposit box," he said, eyes wary. It wasn't the same box that had already revealed the confessional videos. This was another one entirely. For a moment, panic fluttered in me. What else could Adam possibly have hidden away? Jewels for Natalia? More forged statements? Or something far worse? We wasted no time. Together, we visited the local bank. The manager escorted us to a private booth and brought out a small steel box. Within it lay an envelope stuffed with photographs, old pictures of me and Ethan at various stages of life, moments Adam had captured. There were prints of us on family vacations, at Ethan's high school graduation, and even candid shots of me cooking in the kitchen. Tucked beneath them was a simple note in Adam's handwriting. "For Lydia, so she never doubts I did love her once." My breath caught, tears rising despite the bitterness. Adam's final act was heartbreakingly contradictory. Just like him. Where are you all watching from now? Let me know if you're reading this late at night, early morning, or on a lunch break. I'm intrigued by how stories unite us across time zones. I clutched the envelope of photos, and for once, the tears came freely in front of Ethan. He stood stiffly, uncertain if he should comfort me. Carefully, he stepped forward, placing a tentative hand on my shoulder. "He wasn't always a bad father," Ethan said, his voice catching. "Sometimes I think there were two versions of him, the one who'd make us pancakes on Sunday, and the one who built an empire on lies." We left the bank in silence, each of us lost in conflicting memories. Adam had indeed been loving at times, but how do you reconcile that with the man who manipulated your life, orchestrated your downfall, and turned your child against you? Perhaps some mysteries never untangle neatly. Back at the house, we discovered a new visitor in the driveway, Charles Greenwood, one of Adam's oldest friends and business associates. I recalled greeting him at the funeral, never suspecting the swirling darkness behind the scenes. Charles gave me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was hoping to speak with you about a few of Adam's, investments. Alarm bells rang in my head. Juliet had warned me that some of Adam's business partners might try to salvage their own reputations by pinning blame elsewhere. I forced a polite tone. I'm not sure what else I can tell you, Mr. Greenwood. The authorities have everything they need. He cleared his throat, shooting an uneasy glance at Ethan. If something incriminating happens to surface regarding my involvement, I'd appreciate the chance to clarify things first. His eyes flickered with urgency. Ethan folded his arms. Are you worried about your role in covering up Dad's embezzlement? He asked bluntly. Charles's face darkened. Watch your tone, young man. He forced a conciliatory smile in my direction. Lydia, we've known each other for years. I'd hate to see you entangled in any misunderstanding that could come from incomplete evidence. That moment encapsulated the menace lurking in Adam's social circle. The carefully curated facade was crumbling, and men like Charles Greenwood were scrambling to stay afloat. That evening, I updated Juliet and Simon on the unsettling visit. Both reacted with grim understanding. Charles Greenwood has a reputation for bending rules, Juliet explained over the phone. Given the scope of Adam's crimes, it's logical he'd panic. His involvement might be deeper than he'll ever admit. My hands trembled recalling Charles's thinly veiled threats. Is there a chance I'm still in danger? I asked, voice hushed. Simon chose his words carefully. The authorities are keeping a watchful eye on all of Adam's associates. Still, be cautious. Greenwood might not take kindly to official scrutiny. After the call, I couldn't shake the tension. Even the house's warm lamplight felt eerie. Ethan, sensing my anxiety, offered to stay the night in one of the guest rooms. A gesture I welcomed, though it felt surreal. 5 years of estrangement, and here he was, sleeping under my roof again, half ashamed and half protective. In the middle of the night, I wandered downstairs, sleep elusive. Hovering near the garden door, I caught a glimpse of moonlight over the rose bushes. It reminded me of simpler times, before Adam's web closed in. Was it naive to trust the sincerity of his final gestures, the hidden photos, the partial confession? Or was it an exercise in healing to accept that he might have loved me imperfectly, even if his love was overshadowed by unspeakable deception? My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Can't sleep either. Just want you to know I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I responded simply, I love you. We'll get through this. If you've ever had a midnight moment of reflection about life's twist, share a quick comment. 1. If you've come to terms with complicated truths, or 2. If you're still struggling to find answers. It's all part of the journey. The next few days saw a barrage of legal developments. Charles Greenwood was officially named in the fraud investigation. Detective Monroe paid another visit, this time with a small team, and they scoured Adam's study in search of more leads. Their presence felt both intrusive and oddly reassuring. At least the law was on my side now. In a surreal twist, a news crew appeared on our doorstep, camera rolling as a reporter asked for my comment on the expanding embezzlement scandal. I froze, not wanting my face on the evening broadcast. Ethan shooed them away, his voice firm yet courteous. He later apologized if it had been out of line, but I thanked him. I wasn't ready to share my story with the whole world, let alone replay the funeral fiasco in the media. Meanwhile, Ethan volunteered to help me tackle the neglected garden, which had withered under weeks of stress. Side by side, we pruned branches and pulled weeds, no longer mother and child divided by secrets, but two people forging a fragile truce. We talked about trivial things at first, favorite songs, random memories from his childhood, slowly rebuilding a bond that once felt irrevocably broken. All the while, I couldn't shake the sense that Adam's presence lingered in these walls, not as a comforting ghost, but as a cautionary whisper. Every corner of the house contained a memory, some joyful, some laced with hidden motives. Yet each day that passed, I felt a little stronger, as if reclaiming the space were an act of silent defiance against the illusions Adam created. Here's a small invitation. If you're still tuned in, drop a yes if you're enjoying seeing the mother son relationship mend, and a maybe if you think it'll take a lot more time for them to fully trust each other. At Serena's insistence, I finally set up a meeting with a grief counselor. The woman, Dr. Mallory, was a soft spoken professional who listened intently as I described the whiplash of losing Adam to illness, only to discover that he'd essentially orchestrated my ruin. Grief is complex in normal circumstances, she said, but you're dealing with betrayal too. It's not simple to disentangle love and anger. I left her office feeling drained but oddly lighter too, like admitting the complexity of my emotions out loud was a step toward acknowledging them without guilt. I didn't have to canonize or demonize Adam. I could accept that I mourned the man I believed him to be, while also condemning the man he actually was. One evening, as I prepared to host a casual dinner with Ethan, Serena, and Juliet, the phone rang with a blocked number. Against better judgment, I answered. A gruff voice whispered, "Don't think you've won. Greenwood isn't going down without a fight." My heart stammered. Before I could utter a response, the call ended. Shaken, I debated whether to tell Ethan. The last thing I wanted was to stir fear, but as soon as my guests arrived, they saw the pallor in my face. I confided in them. Juliet's reaction was immediate. "We have to inform the detective. Greenwood is definitely behind this." It was a sobering reminder that just because Adam was gone, the aftershocks of his deeds lingered. That night, we locked all the doors, closed the shutters, and tried to enjoy our meal. Conversation revolved around next steps, forging a new path for me, deciding how to handle the house, and considering what to do with the redemption fund Adam left. Serena suggested donating part of it to the victims of the firm's fraud. Juliet supported the idea as a gesture of goodwill, and perhaps even further proof of my non-involvement. Let me know your thoughts. One, if you donate some of the money to those harmed, or two, if you'd keep it to rebuild your own life first. That same evening, in a burst of resolve, Ethan and I retreated to the study with a box of old photo albums. I wanted to show him more than just the pictures Adam had hidden away. I wanted to remind him of who we were before all these lies. Together, we flipped through images of birthdays, vacations by the seaside, and warm holiday gatherings. At first, Ethan was quiet, a subtle heartbreak seeping into his gaze. I recognized his inward struggle, reconciling the father who grinned in these photos with the criminal mastermind who had warped our family dynamic. "You know," I said, pointing to a photo of Adam dancing with me at a friend's wedding. "He used to swing me around so clumsily. The poor man never could keep a beat." A reluctant smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Halfway through, we stumbled upon an old letter tucked in an album sleeve, a note Adam wrote me back when we were dating. In sweet, if overly formal language, he thanked me for standing by him through tough times. "Never doubt that my heart is yours," the letter read. Ethan exhaled sharply. "He meant it then?" he murmured. "So what changed?" I had no definitive answer. Life changed him, money changed him, ambition changed him, or maybe he always had that capacity for darkness. But one thing was clear: this letter was authentic, a testament to a younger Adam who, once upon a time, cherished me. The discovery stung and soothed in equal measure. By the time we closed the final album, the tension between Ethan and me had softened into mutual empathy. "I'm staying here for a while if that's okay," Ethan finally said, glancing around the study with a mixture of guilt and hope. "I want to help secure the house and make sure you're safe. Greenwood or anyone else who tries to intimidate you?" I nodded gratefully, tears threatening. "I'd like that. Are you a believer in second chances for family, or do you think some bridges can't be rebuilt once burned? Share a quick one for yes or two for no. Bright and early the next day, Detective Monroe arrived with two more officers. They had come to collect additional documents Juliet had flagged for them, further proof tying Greenwood to Adam's schemes. Handing them over, I couldn't help but recall the threatening phone call I'd received. Was Greenwood watching us somehow, waiting for a moment of vulnerability? Before leaving, Detective Monroe pulled me aside. "We've arrested Greenwood," he said quietly, attempting to board a private plane at a local airfield. He had $500,000 in cash and was heading for a country with no extradition, but we got him. The relief was so intense, I had to steady myself against the wall. With Greenwood in custody, the final piece of Adam's shadowy network was collapsing. Over the next few weeks, the media reported a sequence of swift indictments, and multiple victims filed lawsuits seeking restitution. The law firm's board assured they would do everything possible to compensate clients from recovered funds. Even so, the scandal was massive, a blemish on the entire industry. In the calm after that tempest, I found myself in the garden, pruning the very roses I once tended with love for Adam. The sun warmed my shoulders, and the rhythmic snip of the shears felt meditative, as if each trimmed thorn represented a part of my old life I was cutting away. In the house behind me, Ethan was on the phone, finalizing a statement with the authorities to confirm I had been a victim all along. I sensed the ghosts of the past everywhere, moments of laughter, the echo of footsteps, the intangible sense of having once believed everything was ordinary. Yet the garden itself felt renewed, as if the act of weeding out the rotted parts let fresh blooms flourish. If you're still reading, would you keep the house if you were in my shoes, or sell it to sever ties with painful memories? Comment 1 for keeping it, 2 for leaving it behind. As winter approached, my life settled into a new routine. Mornings were spent at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, reviewing correspondence from the firm's receivership, which updated me on the slow but steady process of reimbursing defrauded clients. Juliet's assistance proved invaluable. She ensured that any misdirected blame toward me was corrected with incontrovertible evidence. Simon tied up the legal loose ends, and soon enough, I was no longer under suspicion at all. Ethan chose to remain at the house, and we slowly healed together. His remorse was palpable each time he saw the grim relics of Natalia's occupancy. Her choice of modern, showy decorations that I began to replace one by one. We'd stand in the living room, deciding which paint colors or furniture pieces would fit better. Each small renovation felt like reclaiming my home from Adam's illusions. Sometimes we found ourselves crying unexpectedly, like when I replaced a framed family portrait. He'd pause and say, "Mom, I should have noticed how much Dad was isolating you." And I'd remind him that love and trust had blinded us both. Word reached me that Natalia had accepted a plea deal, handing over incriminating evidence against Greenwood and possibly saving herself from the harshest sentence. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. There was a lingering ache of betrayal whenever I recalled her triumphant smile at Adam's funeral. At the same time, I recognized she'd been manipulated too, in her own way, though she'd willingly participated. As for Greenwood, rumor had it he faced a lengthy prison term. One blustery Saturday, I sat on the back patio with Ethan, watching dried leaves swirl over the lawn. The apple tree Ethan had planted, our symbolic fresh start, stood slender but resilient, its leaves rustling in the cold wind. He handed me a mug of hot cocoa. "I know it'll take time for you to fully forgive me," he said, voice quaking. "And I'm not asking you to forget what I did, but I hope you know I love you." My throat thickened. "Ethan, love might not fix everything overnight, but I'd rather have your honesty than a million illusions." He squeezed my hand, a solemn vow unspoken between us. The phone rang, interrupting that tender moment. It was Serena, her tone bright with excitement. She'd just been informed that a local women's shelter was hosting a fundraising gala for victims of financial and domestic abuse, an event she thought would resonate with my experience. "They'd love for you to speak, Lydia," she said. "No pressure, but your story could inspire others." Heat rushed to my cheeks. Me? Speak publicly about Adam's betrayal? A swirl of anxiety tangled in my stomach. But then I recalled the calls from the accountant and others who'd witnessed Adam's wrongdoing and felt powerless to stop it. If sharing my story helped even one person avoid being trapped in a deceitful marriage or business partnership, maybe it was worth the discomfort. I gave a tentative yes, and Serena practically squealed in delight. When I hung up, Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're going to stand on a stage and talk about Dad's crimes?" "About survival," I corrected gently, "and about learning that someone's love can't define our worth. Adam's betrayal isn't the only story. I am my own story." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. That evening, we rehearsed what I might say. It was strange voicing out loud the darkest moments, arriving at Adam's funeral only to be blindsided, losing Ethan to carefully orchestrated lies, uncovering the horrifying extent of the fraud. But when we reached the point in my narrative where I discovered Adam's partial confession and redemption fund, a sense of power replaced my shame. I wasn't the helpless victim I'd once felt like. I was a person who had survived and emerged stronger. If you've ever shared a personal struggle publicly, you know that mixture of vulnerability and relief. Tell me, do you think speaking about your trauma helps heal it? Comment 1. Or do you believe it risks reopening old wounds? Comment 2. The gala took place in a modest event hall draped in twinkling lights and decorated with small centerpieces. The audience was a mix of survivors, donors, and advocates, all gathered under the shared goal of addressing financial abuse and domestic manipulation. My nerves felt like live wires as I stepped onto the small stage. But as I gazed out over the crowd, I spotted Serena and Juliet cheering me on, and Ethan standing near the back, hands clasped in silent support. I began by describing the two illusions that shaped my life: the facade of a perfect marriage and the lie that I was somehow responsible for our family's downfall. I recounted the moment Ethan walked into Adam's funeral with Natalia, the cruelty of that unveiling. Gasps rippled through the audience. I watched strangers exchange horrified glances, but also saw a flicker of recognition in some eyes. People who'd endured similar betrayals. Then I spoke of Adam's final confession, his labyrinth of forged documents, and how he manipulated Ethan into hating me. I explained how a supportive network, Serena's unwavering friendship, Juliet's forensic brilliance, Simon's legal counsel, helped me stand tall rather than crumble under accusations. And I ended on the note that healing is a process. Sometimes love coexists with the darkest of wrongdoings, and forgiving ourselves for what we didn't see is the first step to moving forward. Afterward, the applause thundered through my ears. I stepped off the stage, heart pounding, tears threatening for the thousandth time. Several people approached me: women who'd left controlling partners, men who'd fought back against corporate exploitation, even a young couple wanting to ensure they built a relationship on honesty rather than secrets. Each thank you I received felt like a piece of my pain transmuted into purpose. Ethan approached last. His eyes shone, though I suspected he was fighting back tears. "Mom, that was brave," he whispered. "I had no idea how much strength you had all along. If you're still with me, let me know if you believe sharing hardships can create true community." Comment 1 for yes, 2 if you're not sure. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still court dates, statements to sign, and the lingering sense that Adam would have faced a monstrous trial if he'd survived. But each sunrise felt a bit less burdensome. I chose to keep the house, converting Adam's old study into a library filled with books that brought me joy. I wanted to reclaim every inch of the space he'd used to spin deceit. Meanwhile, Ethan found a new job in the area, stepping away from the toxic environment of his father's former firm. On weekends, we spent time in the garden, nurturing the apple tree that symbolized our fresh start. Sometimes we talked openly about what had happened. Other times, we just enjoyed the wordless comfort of being together. The redemption fund Adam had left me became a tool for good. With Juliet's guidance, I donated a portion to a victims advocacy group and used the rest to secure my future. Serena joked that I should take a trip somewhere peaceful, maybe a seaside retreat, to rediscover my identity. I just might do that someday, but for now, I've found unexpected solace in my own backyard. One brisk afternoon, as the leaves began to change color, Ethan and I stood by the apple tree, observing how it had rooted itself firmly in the soil. Think it'll blossom in spring? He asked. I smiled, touched a budding branch, and said, I believe it will. We've tended to it just enough. It dawned on me that the same could be said for our relationship, fragile, but with every chance to flourish if we continued to care for it. When I reflect on the day Ethan escorted Natalia into Adam's funeral, proclaiming her as Dad's true love, I realize how drastically my perspective has shifted. Back then, I felt only shock and devastation. Now, I understand it was the cataclysm that forced every hidden lie into the open. It wasn't the end of me, but the beginning of a life built on honesty, healing, and self-determination. So here we are at the end of my story. If you've stayed with me, thank you. If you've felt anger, compassion, or reflection along the way, you've helped make sense of this journey. Remember, no matter how deep the betrayal, truth has a way of finding its light, and sometimes that light is enough to guide you toward a future you never imagined. Thank you for joining me on her Fireside Stories today. Lydia's journey through unimaginable betrayal to powerful redemption shows us how strength and truth can prevail, even in the darkest times. Her courage reminds us that while we can't control the deceit of others, we always have the power to reclaim our own narrative. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Would you have handled things like Lydia did, or taken another path entirely? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and please let me know where you're listening from. I cherish hearing from our global community. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button to stay connected and support the channel. There are so many more remarkable stories waiting for you here at her Fireside Stories, and I can't wait to share them all with you. Until next time, may your own fireside glow warmly, lighting your path with courage, clarity, and hope.